Staying with Morning Live now, the African Women in Dialogue was launched last year to create a platform for women across the continent to advocate for solutions to challenges facing Africa. Now, the dialogue comes to South Africa next month under the theme Women's Voices and Power as Agents of Change. And earlier this month, AfWID had the honor of presenting to the United Nations Security Council on preventative diplomacy. So to speak to us about this a little more, we have Naledi Maite, who's the spokesperson for the African Women in Dialogue. Thanks so much for coming through.
Thank you very much.
So how would you rate the success of the program thus far? I mean, it is a big deal. If you look at Africa and women in the African context, it's about time, some would say, that our voices were heard more.
Absolutely. So as you would know, this is the second year that we're hosting the platform. Last year, we had 1,000 women from all 16 SADC countries. This year, we've decided to take the next step and have invited 1,000 women from 55 countries. And this whole platform really, as you say, is a realization of a long-term dream of having a platform which is firstly convened by African women in Africa. You know, for the longest of time, in many platforms, African women have been convened by other people, perhaps not on African soil, like through UN processes, etc. You know, so this for us is quite a momentous occasion, also at this really big scale, because it's really rare to have women from so many different countries just under one roof, you know, to say that we're here and we want to have solidarity amongst ourselves and to collectively talk about the issues and challenges that face us and to also collectively envision the kind of continent that we want.
But looking at next month's conference, you know, what would be the focus? Because one wouldn't want this to degenerate into just yet another talk shop, as it were.
No, absolutely. So in terms of the theme, as you said, it's women's power and voices, agents of change. We want to begin the conference with being able to really celebrate the agency of African women. As you know, from time immemorial, we've always been champions and sort of resistance and particularly champions of change on this continent. And we just want to take a moment to be able to celebrate that, for instance. The conference also is going to talk heavily on the issue of women, peace and security. As you know, there's still so many different conflicts and wars which are raging on the continent, and the shoe pinches the most for women, you know. And so we want to take the opportunity just to talk and, you know, talk about even how has Resolution 1325 worked for us as African women, for instance. Are we, you know, in the forefront of leading mediation, and are we being used, for example, or being involved with regards to being able to create solutions to those conflicts, for instance. So it's going to be, you know, a jam-packed thing, but I think also one of the things that we're trying to do in order for the momentum to not be lost is being able to strengthen solidarity networks. A lot of the times we hear about each other's struggles through news channels, and we want women to be able to say, should anything happen in Sudan, should anything happen in Burundi or anywhere on the continent, you're able to pick up a phone and say, sister, how are you doing? How can women of this particular country help you better? You know, so that's how we want to be able to plan to create momentum.
And with regard to the delegates who will be attending, how do you actually go about inviting people? How do you decide who to invite to the conference?
So a very big principle and founding principle of this platform is inclusivity. And it really goes to the principle also of not leaving everybody behind. A very big category is that we want the participation to be 60% grassroots women. And that means having women or trying to invite women from under-resourced communities, whether it's in rural or even urban settings, women from minority groups, whether they're refugees, women from the LGBTI community, and women with disabilities. And so we've really asked, we've got regional coordinators who've really worked so hard to find women. A lot of the women, even to come here, never had passports. Some never had birth certificates, for instance. So having to start that process from that level to eventually get a passport, to then to apply to a visa. So, you know, and part of how we get the women to participate and also to ensure that no voice is excluded is that we've also had to do quite a bit in facilitating that inclusivity to happen, meaning that a lot of the participation, all of it is funded for women to truly be here. And also I think really moving away from the typical global approach of only having a certain type of person involved in these kinds of conferences, you know, people who maybe have high education levels or middle class people. And we're really trying to say every voice counts. And we've really gone a long way in trying to ensure that every voice is in that room.
But how are you going to make sure that that actually translates? Because it's one thing inviting women, you know, and having them there, but how are you going to prove to the rest of the world and the naysayers that those voices actually do matter, they actually are heard? How are you going to create the platforms for that?
I think in this particular dialogue, this is definitely a start. I suppose we don't have a blueprint with regards to how we go about sustaining it in future. But one of the things that we've really noticed, particularly when we go to international conferences, you'll always find on the stage they put a chair and they say, oh, this chair represents those women who couldn't be able to come to this. And this is what we're trying to push back against, is these women are there and we just need to try a bit harder in ensuring that they're also in the room. And as we said, part of this conference is that because women come and speak in their own voices, there isn't like in terms of what certain outcomes is, to ensure that the women, whenever they go back to their communities, they're able to take what it is that they've learned in order and move with it with their own mandate and their own agency. And hoping that those particular voices of women who aren't traditionally in these spaces are able to feel confident and inspired enough in order to use their voice more in the communities that they come from.
Well, Naledi Maite, thanks so much for stopping by this morning and just giving us a sense of what to expect in that conference next month. And Naledi is the spokesperson for African Women in Dialogue. No doubt a conference that we will be keeping an eye on, and very interested in what the successes from that conference will look like. Let's take a break, and after that, in fact, we're going straight to